Hi guys, this is Sean Phillips. This is my video submission for EDL 851, Supervision and Evaluation of School Personnel, Module 8 regarding legal aspects of teacher evaluation. In this module, we were supposed to summarize 3 different articles. The first of which was Teacher Evaluation, Every Student Succeed Act, or ESA. Basically, this article was just kind of a summary of the ESA and how it's going to impact education. The ESA Act refers to the Secretary of Education not being allowed, basically for the federal government to be able to define teacher evaluation systems or to be able to define what teacher effectiveness. This kind of has been throughout history a state issue, and this is just making sure that this continues to be a state issue. Now, states can determine the goals and evaluate student performance based on lots of different things. And even though the federal government cannot mandate the evaluation system or what effectiveness is, states can do that. So if a state chooses to do so, we can still, the state can pinpoint what they value as effective teaching and what tool plans to be used. In general, the ESA, though, states that states can adopt student achievement, but they should probably put a few things into consideration before determining what they're going to use. One of those being using a quality tool. You know, it's not fair to base personnel decisions, someone's livelihood on a tool that has not been tested and shown to be a quality instrument. It's also important to train your staff before using it. If their livelihood is going to be on the line because of this evaluation system, it's important that as a district or as a state even, that teachers are trained on how to use it and also how administrators are trained on being able to use it correctly. That way they're not making personnel decisions without knowing exactly how that tool is supposed to work. And also there needs to be an auditing system in place. There needs to be a way for a system to be evaluated, improved upon, or modified in order to be a more effective instrument. So what has ESA done for teachers? Well, one thing about ESA is that it allows teachers to keep rights that they already have. So if you have anything in place, you can continue to have that, but it doesn't give you any new rights. Those new rights would be something that could be collectively bargained, but in general, this is just allowing you to keep, not to get new, different rights. It also, for an impact on teachers, means teachers need to be involved in the development of these tools. There will be greater buy-in if teachers are a part of the evaluation process and determining what tool is going to be used. So their input should be involved when coming up with this evaluation instrument. And then also, before choosing to use a tool, there should be some type of pilot system in place beforehand. You don't just jump in with something and tie everything to it without it being tested and shown to be a valuable and accurate instrument. Also, anytime you're coming up with improvement plans, and any due process right should also be considered when coming up with some evaluation system. Is there some method of a teacher being able to maybe contest a poor evaluation or something along those lines? And in general, for teachers tend to think of tests as not being an accurate way to measure effectiveness or to improve instruction. There are so many different variables that we'll get into here in just a little bit about what can impact a student's achievement level. So tying test scores to a person's livelihood is generally not considered accurate from a teaching standpoint. The second article that we looked at had to do with how the idea of new teacher evaluation systems creating a giant flow of court cases where decisions about this evaluation process having to be considered. Most of this has to do with using the test scores as the major measure of how you're going to evaluate teachers. That's led to lots of different court cases, and most of the groups that have been involved in this typically come from the American Federation of Teachers or the NEA, the National Education Association. And in some cases, there have even been some individual teachers that have went to court over some evaluation practices. Well, what are they looking at? What are the points of contention? Well, there are questions about the grading components. What do you choose for being the exact things that you look at for effective teaching? Using scores to judge all teachers. Is it fair to judge a teacher based upon how other teachers do and score? Is the tool itself fair? Does it deal with any variations for individual students, such as poverty? And then this evaluation system, how does it impact tenure? Some teachers already have tenure in their districts, and by changing the evaluation process, could that be taken away from them? So there have been some cases that have dealt with this, and there are a few that have been ruled upon there, but there are many that are still in process. Some of the things that they've looked at so far is a school-wide growth formula. So can teachers that teach a subject, let's say some elective that doesn't actually have a standardized test, can they have a growth formula applied to them, even though they don't teach something that has standardized testing that could be used to evaluate all teachers? And in general, the courts have said yes, that a school-wide growth formula can apply. And another point of contention has to do with pay. Their merit pay seems to be kind of a buzz of late, and if I'm a teacher that adds a lot of growth to a student, can I get paid more? Well, some teachers have argued that merit pay is something that should be collectively bargained because teacher salaries are collectively bargained, but the state ruled that they are not under collectively bargained wages, so merit pay would be something that could be considered. The state, though, has rejected the idea of issuing teacher evaluations, even though legislative proposals for it didn't go through. So there needs to be more of a legal aspect to the determination of your instruments. And then there's also the point of contention of, can teacher evaluation tie to having tenure or what pay scale that you're on? And in general, the state has ruled in favor of that. There are still some things that are pending. Things related to teachers that have tenure beforehand. Do they have vested contractual rights for that? That still is yet to be determined, at least based upon the print of the article. Could a teacher receive poor ratings because of poorly or flawed data? So if the data is bad, why should that teacher be then downgraded because of that? Could the State Department impose a new evaluation system despite the law giving the school districts control? So if my district has control over evaluation, is it okay for the state just to come out and say, no, we're going to use this? And then how does outside influence such as poverty play a role in the education of students? And should teachers that teach students that are high poverty, should they be penalized because maybe that is an issue that makes it a little more difficult for some of those students to succeed? Other things that are still are pending. Do the ranking methods that they use for evaluations, are there inconsistencies, or can they lead to actually just an incorrect evaluation? Could a teacher sue and get damages or paid bonuses if that data is incorrect? If there's a miscalculation of test scores and I miss out on an opportunity to get extra pay, can I sue for back pay in that case? Is the definition of student growth too vague? So how do we actually know what growth is? There are lots of different areas that could have growth. Could we be more specific? And then do students that don't speak English as a primary language, is it biased against those? And then thus the teachers that teach those students, is it going to impact them negatively as well? So all these things still have to be sorted out. So just this whole evaluation process, how has that come about? Well, that's our third article, Teacher Evaluation and Issue Overview. Well, there's been lots of different factors that have led to the reason why there's been a look at how we need to change evaluation of teachers. Some of that has to do with new research. There's been a lot of research out talking about how top teachers can cause gains of more than 1 year of learning for their students. There are also philanthropic interests, like Bill Gates. He put out money for trying to create better evaluation systems for teachers so that kids can get a higher quality education. There are also advocacy groups, and policymakers, so government officials trying to create laws that make education a better process in their view. But a lot of these things tend to just look for how are we going to get rid of poorly performing teachers. Well, what are the characteristics of some of these new evaluation processes? Well, one is how many times you're going to be observed. Typically, a lot of these new evaluation systems specify exactly how many times, multiple times in fact, that a teacher should be observed, looking for the framework of teaching, the general characteristics of what a good teacher is. Most of these new evaluation processes want to include student test scores in the evaluation process as a way to show evidence of growth. And that kind of focuses on the value-added model. The value-added model is a way to just try to assign a number to how much the teacher has actually impacted the learning of their students. So what's been the reaction to this? Well, for teachers, most of it hasn't been positive. Most teachers are encouraged by getting better evaluations and better feedback. However, They don't really like the idea of tying tenure to your pay, tying tenure and pay to your test scores. Student test scores can vary for lots of different reasons, and tenure and salary are big issues for teachers, and having a test score be a main factor in what determines that is not something that seems to be fair. One thing about the value-added model that we mentioned earlier is that it doesn't really take into account students that have special needs, that may have a little more difficulty learning. It doesn't take into account what a student's home life might be like. If they're having lots of issues outside of school, then it's going to be difficult for them to learn at school. And it also can be, faked by teaching to the test. Students may do well on a test, but have they really learned anything overall? It's also unfair for teachers that teach subjects that aren't tested. So now if they don't have a standardized test to measure, it's not fair for them. And overall, the results are showing that there's not a huge impact. It's mixed at best. Tying test scores doesn't necessarily show, or looking at test scores doesn't necessarily show the true effectiveness of a teacher. Well, here in Tonganoxie, the general framework of how we evaluate, in the first 2 years, every teacher gets evaluated twice per year, or once each semester. In years 3 and 4, you get evaluated once a year, and that has to be done before February 15th. And then once you've been in our district for 5 years, that evaluation will occur once every 3 years. Well, what's that process look like? Well, we use the evaluation tool from McCrell. And basically it starts out with a pre-conference. In a pre-conference, every teacher will then have to complete their own self-assessment, evaluate where they're at amongst all these different indicators, and based upon that come up with 3 goals for the year. After that, we will have an initial conference where I will submit my goals to my administrator, and we'll come up with a time that he wants to come in to observe me teach. During that observation time, he's going to take some notes, write down different things that I do, and just kind of see how things are going. After that, he'll take some time in his analysis to come up with some findings, and I will have to think about what I've done to progress towards my goals that I set. Then we'll come back and we'll go ahead and have our conference where my administrator will discuss about the observation. I will talk about what I have done towards my goals, and I'll get a final evaluation at that point. And then after that, in the post-conference, he will give me an overall rating that will be put in my final evaluation, and I will then work towards finishing up whatever goals I haven't achieved at that point. So in our district, if there's an inaccurate evaluation in the opinion of the teacher, they have the ability to write a personal rebuttal and then put that into your file. There will be a section on the evaluation itself that will ask if you have any comments, and you can put anything in there as well. If a teacher is being terminated and they feel it's unjust, there's a couple of different things. This is why it's important to be involved. One of the reasons why it's important to be involved with NEA, in my opinion. You can have them come in and moderate a meeting with the administration and see if there are any legal issues that could be addressed. Or you could also request a due process hearing directly by the Board of Education. And the Board of Education then can determine if you should be terminated or not. Another thing is a case involving where a teacher sues a district. In Texas, a math teacher, Sharon Toussaint, was fired because her classroom effectiveness index was low, and that's the rating that they give for that school to determine if she's effective or not. She argued that the rating didn't take all conditions into account, even though they said that it was a credible instrument. Well, upon suing the district, the court ruled that it was the environment of the school and not poor teaching practices that was the cause of the poor score that she had. And so the court ruled in favor of this teacher and said that she must be reinstated with back pay, or the school would have to pay an entire year's salary to her. So in the future, what can I do? Well, I think professional development is important for any administrator. Staying up on current issues is key, and that professional development will allow for discussion on interpretation and things like that. I think members to national organizations that are in the state and federal government agencies that look into all the different laws and how they impact schools, being a member of those would be important as you get updates on that. My own personal research and awareness would be important, and I also think it's very important to make sure that I stay aware of and train with the specific evaluation tool that our school would use. Because if I don't know the system well, then I can't use it as effectively as it could be. So staying on top of that will allow me to make the best decisions for teachers. So that's my presentation. I hope you learned a little bit about me and about the process, and I will be talking to all of you soon.